From the rugged desert outside Yuma, Arizona, this is Outpost Outspoken. Outpost Outspoken is the official podcast of U.S. Army Yuma Proving Ground, which conducts natural environment testing of military equipment in Arizona, Alaska, and the tropics.
Welcome to this segment of Outpost Outspoken. I'm your host, Ana Henderson. U.S. Army Yuma Proving Ground supports the Department of Defense and the Army. Its mission to test equipment for the warfighter attracts veterans from all branches of service after their separation from the military. Jonathan Olbert has had the unique experience to work at YPG and also serve in the Army Reserves at the same time. Welcome, John. Tell me about your career in the Army.
Well, I started out my career in the Army at Arizona State University, where through the ROTC program there, I commissioned as an engineer officer with a degree in civil engineering. From there, I did advanced training down at Fort Benning, Georgia, the Airborne School, and then settled into my first duty station in the swamps of Fort Polk, Louisiana. I was immediately assigned to a unit responsible for the stateside disaster response, and then eventually moved to complete Captain's career course up in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. As I was getting settled in there, I supported efforts as a result of Superstorm Sandy that occurred on the East Coast. I volunteered to support the Army Corps of Engineers there with the relief effort at the Emergency Operations Center as one of the battle captains running 24-hour ops there. Returning from there, I completed Captain's career course, moved to Fort Hood, Texas, where I was a battalion construction officer in an engineer battalion, and then eventually went down to a civil affairs battalion where I was the battalion engineer there. While there, I deployed to Central America, the Caribbean, to support counter-narco-terrorism, human trafficking operations throughout the Civil Affairs Engagement Program, as well as supported disaster relief and preparedness operations.
It seems like you had a really diverse career. You started to go to school for engineering, and then you went to humanitarian type work. How did that transition?
Yeah, no, it was the lower echelon units that I was in was always construction focused, and so our kind of effort was guided into debris removal, clearance operations. So it was kind of being able to use, instead of your vehicles and equipment to build roads and buildings, it was, how to possibly remove debris from a disaster area, do it safely, and also search out for civilians and support them in reconstruction efforts. So it was an interesting experience and a good way to diversify outside of just the typical construction and warfighting aspect of the military.
It seems like it was not only like a physical job, but a mental job as well.
There was a lot of technical information that you had to know, as well as planning information and liaison and coordination, especially when you work with civil authorities. So it was definitely different outside the scope of your typical soldier activities, but it's definitely worthwhile there. But after my active duty time, that was about it, and I moved on to join the Army Reserves and came out to Yuma, Arizona.
How long did you serve full-time active duty?
Full-time active duty was approximately about 7 years, and so after about 7 years, it was time to get out. My wife, her family's all from Yuma, and she needed to be with her father, who ended up passing during our transition out here. But I still wanted to maintain that connection with the Army and the warfighter, and so I also felt like that's where my strengths kind of best suited me, so I decided to come out to YPG, where it's like an exciting environment, get to work with tactical vehicles and everything. I considered it to be pretty fun, and it's nice to tackle challenges that directly support the warfighter.
So at this point, you are a reservist, and then you're also working for YPG. How did that help you while you're doing your duties here? Because you started as a test officer, correct?
Yeah, as a test officer, I guess if you're a civilian engineer coming into YPG, you may not have the mindset and understanding about what are tactical vehicles, how are they used, how are they employed, how should they act and respond to user input. So being able to have the experience as someone out there operating and in the field with the equipment that's tested out here, you kind of see like, hey, this is what the end result we need, and we want to make sure we get the best product out to soldiers.
Now, how long were you in your career at YPG when you got a very interesting phone call that kind of changed everything up?
Yeah, so it was about 2-3 years into my time here when I got a phone call from my reservist commander and said, I don't know what you did or who you pissed off, John, but you got to pack your bags. You're going to Iraq. You'll be there in a couple months. And I'm like, what? Excuse me? So I was mobilized and reassigned to the 18th Airborne Corps to assist in operations out there supporting CJTF OIR, which is basically the counter-ISIS mission. And so 18th Airborne Corps has a large headquarters in both Kuwait as well as Iraq. And so I kind of transitioned between the two areas and supported out with engineer operations there, mainly construction.
Now, we joke that you got in trouble and that's why, but if you look back to all the previous experience that you had airborne, you had, rescue, rebuilding. So all that kind of just, seemed like they picked the perfect guy with that perfect experience for it. And how long was that deployment, and how did YPG react when you're like, I have to leave?
Yeah, well, I talked with my supervisors. They fully supported me. Dean Shimizu, he was the first one I went to, and he said, well, we hate to lose you, but we want to make sure that you're taken care of. And then I talked to Colonel Poppenberg about it. He's like, oh, yeah, it'd be great for your career. You'll have a great time, great experience. And I'm like, all right. So it was pretty set that I was on my way out the door. But
you're like, everyone wanted to test this? You sure?
Yeah, everyone here supported me. And what was interesting is at the time I was testing a piece of equipment that while I was in Iraq, I actually saw it out there and being used. Well, I heard it being used in the middle of the night when it was taking down drones. But yeah, it was a pretty interesting experience out there, seeing the results of work that we do here at YPG.
Wow. All right. And then once you headed back to YPG, you transitioned from a test officer into another role. Can you tell me about that transition and what this current job entails?
Yeah, so I left my test officer position in the Combat and Automotive Systems Division. And then, I thoroughly enjoyed that position, but I moved on to a position as an investments manager in the Technologies and Investments Directorate. And so my primary job focuses on identifying needs, developing solutions, prioritizing projects, getting funding for everything. In the past 2 years, I've been helping with YPG's planning efforts and execution for project convergence as well. And so most recently, we executed the Technology Gateway event, and that was back in September and October of last year. And then also some of my other duties revolve around being a COR for the Soil Environmental Research Contract. And that basically executes activities across all 3 test centers. So I have kind of an investments management job as well as, some other development jobs that always kind of keeps me working and on my toes, so it's good. And
TID is forward-looking a lot.
Yes.
So how would you say it plays into the Army modernization?
It's an interesting organization here at YPG, and I really think of it as strategically focused. I don't want to use too many buzzwords here, but TID does work to transform YPG to the next level where we need to be. And, we do that through investing in all the key capabilities that we need and develop those solutions for the many challenges that YPG as well as the ATEC enterprise encounters. So it's a lot of work and meeting with other people, making sure everything's synchronized together to get the effect that we want.
I only heard 6 buzzwords. You're good.
Well, specifically all the test requirements that are coming down the road, we lay down that strategic plan. We meet those requirements. We make out that plan, and then we execute. If we're successful in all of our endeavors, we've positioned ourselves in YPG to really be in that position to provide, ensuring that safe and effective testing on all the combat equipment we come across, which will eventually give us overmatch against our global threats, and eventually, we'll be standing ready to be that Army of 2030.
Let's talk about you outside of work. You're also very busy outside of work. You're married. You have 2 young children. Plus, you're a volunteer coach.
I love my free time, spending it with my family and the community. Being a soccer coach allows you to engage with just not your kids and get them involved in a passion that you once had or still have, and then make sure you see the excitement in the kids' faces that they're learning something new. But I always like to garden. I love the outdoors. I love camping outside. So if anyone out there needs a outdoor buddy to go camping, hunting, target shooting, whatever, we can crack open a beer and have some fun.
Well, it sounds like you live a very exciting and full life, and we really thank you for your service to the country and also what you do for YPG.
No, thank you, Anna.
Welcome back to Outpost Outspoken. In 2022, U.S. Army Yuma Proving Grounds incoming chaplain had the difficult task of rebuilding the congregation and the programs that the restrictions due to the COVID pandemic had shut down. Chaplain Captain Ryan Pearse, a former Army Ranger, took the challenge head-on. Today, he joins us to talk about the challenges and the successes. Welcome, Chaplain. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, at this point, you've been at YPG for about 6 months. How's it been for you and your family?
So, we got here in July, and of course, that's one of the hottest months here at YPG. And so that was kind of a shock, especially coming from the East Coast. But other than the weather, getting here in July was great. And, we've been here for about 5 months now. Things have only gotten better. I got a wife, 4 kids, and we're loving YPG.
Tell me about the situation at the chapel when you first took over in mid-2022.
Yeah, so there was still some COVID restrictions, and we were kind of coming out of COVID. So the chapel at YPG, just like the chapels across the Army, kind of took a hit. And so it was a very small congregation. And I just knew that, we got to rebuild the chapel and we got to rebuild the congregation. And that's been my focus, since I got here.
I spoke with you when you first arrived, and I know that there were some specific goals that you wanted for the chapel. What were those?
Well, obviously to increase attendance, but just to really be a light and a beacon in the community. I mean, to revitalize the chapel, and in so doing, revitalize the community. The YPG Chapel is literally basically in the center of the Howard Cantonment area, in between lower housing and upper housing. And I just wanted the chapel to be a place, for people to go, of course, for Sunday services, but all the other ministries that we have going on, and just wanted to revitalize it and the community.
And I know that you do things like having fresh coffee always on hand and just reminding people that your doors are always open. So I think that's amazing. So in late 2022, you kicked off a ton of programs. Tell me about those.
We have 3 main ongoing programs that we started, like you said, later in 2022, and they're going to continue on for as long as I'm going to be here at least. The first one, Youth of the Chapel. So that is middle schoolers, high schoolers, and they meet twice a month. And then you have Ladies Social, and they meet monthly. And then the third one is Parents and Kids Playgroup, and they meet twice a month as well. So those are 3 big ministries, ongoing ministries that we have at the YPG Chapel that are really targeted for those particular audiences. Youth of the Chapel, middle school and high schoolers, Ladies Social, obviously the ladies of YPG, and then Parents and Kids Playgroup, which my wife leads twice a month. And they either meet at the chapel or they go around to the different playgrounds throughout YPG, and just a great, opportunity for parents and kids to get together.
And you also hosted a lunch that community was welcome, but it kind of also focused a little bit on the workforce as well. You hosted it right in the middle of lunchtime, and people were able to come out and hear a little bit about your service.
Yeah, so that was a spiritual fitness luncheon, and I'd like to continue to do them maybe once a quarter. But last quarter did a spiritual fitness luncheon, and just like it sounds, it was a luncheon determined to, improve the spiritual fitness of the YPG community. So we had some soldiers there. We also had a lot of the civilian workforce there. And that was just a great luncheon that the chapel provided. And then I got to speak, and hopefully some people learned some things about their spiritual fitness.
And you recently hosted Vacation Bible School for the children on post. Tell me what was significant about this VBS.
The big significance of it was we hadn't done anything like that since pre-COVID. So it had been at least 3 years. And also, most people think of Vacation Bible School as happening during the summer. And I wanted to do just a 1-day winter Vacation Bible School. So that's what we did. We had almost 30 kids sign up. We had about a dozen adult volunteers. So a really great showing there for the kids and for the volunteers. And that was a great event, but it was also a great warm-up for us because we want to do a full week VBS sometime this upcoming summer.
And 2 points that you and I had talked about before, even though it was Vacation Bible School and you just think of only children, you had mentioned that there was travel camp visitors that were volunteering. Tell me about your volunteers.
Yeah, so the snowbirds have been huge at the chapel, whether on Sunday morning or during the other ministries that I've talked about. And in particular at VBS, I mean, events like that we can't do without the great volunteerism of the snowbirds. So a lot of great volunteers there. It was a success in large part because of them.
You had mentioned this was also your first time hosting a Vacation Bible School.
Yes. And I mean, considering it was the first time that we had led one, I think, once again, it went off great. I mean, my kids have been to many Vacation Bible Schools. That was the first one that I was actually in charge of. So I had experience from the outside in, but this was the first time that I actually was in charge of one.
Okay, and I hear that you want to continue this and again host a longer one in the summers.
Yes, we are shooting for the end of summer and probably do a 4-day VBS.
So another unique step you have taken is teaming up with other community support units at YPG. How has this helped you reach more people and integrate yourself and your religious affairs specialist into the community?
Anything that we do at the YPG Chapel, we're not trying to do in a box. I mean, it goes back to chapel revitalization and community revitalization. And the best way to revitalize the community is to get other people involved and to reach out to other people. And that's what we've done, over the last few months, especially, whether that's here at YPG, whether that's going all the way into the town of Yuma, or even MCAS. I mean, we integrate ourselves with the MCAS UMTs, unit ministry teams as well. So it's really just, one big team and one big fight to revitalize the chapel and community here.
So speaking of the Yuma community, I know that you have been integrating yourself in the community by doing the invocations at events there, and I think that's always appreciated by the community. Before you head out, can you just remind the listeners how they can reach you and also the times of your 2 services each Sunday? Yeah,
so we can be reached by simply typing in on Facebook, YPG Chapel, and you'll find us, Yuma Proving Ground Chapel or just YPG Chapel. You can send us a message that way. Of course, you can come to the chapel at any time. Our doors are mostly unlocked. We're there most of the time, and either myself or one of the religious affairs specialists will be able to help you. Our 2 service times on Sunday morning, we have 9:30 is the Catholic service, and then the 1100 service is the Protestant service, and that's the service that I lead. And that service ends at approximately noon, and noon every Sunday. And this is an invitation for everyone. We have a potluck lunch at noon every Sunday. Even if you don't bring anything, that's fine. You can come. We always have enough food, so hope to see everyone on Sunday morning. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, Chaplain Pearse, thank you for your time, and thank you for everything that you do for the YPG community and the Yuma community.
Thank you.
This has been Outpost Outspoken. Thank you again for listening. We'll see you next time from the Army's busiest test center.